Today, we're going to be doing our Tech Talk, Workspot, and the Cloud PC Era. We're joined today by Brad Peterson, VP Marketing at Workspot, Michael Shuster, CEO of Ferroque Systems, Todd Shu, President of Ferroque Systems, and myself, Amber. Hi, everybody. I look after marketing here. Brad Peterson holds a Master of Science Electrical and Computer Engineering degree from the University of Southern California, as well as a Bachelor of Science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Throughout Brad's career, he has held executive roles at Net6, Octane, which was acquired by Epiphany, Baystone, which was acquired by Remedy, and Auspex. In 2004, Brad joined Citrix through the acquisition of Net6 and subsequently relocated to the Citrix EMEA headquarters in Switzerland and launched the new security appliance business over a 2-year period. More recently, Brad was Vice President of Marketing at DocuSign, and today, Brad leads marketing strategy and operations for Workspot. Welcome, Brad. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Amber.
Michael Shuster is the CEO of Ferroque Systems and a highly recognized Citrix consulting partner in North America. Serving the role of an architect, Michael has sat on Citrix's consulting team for over half a decade and has led many of Citrix's most significant consulting engagements. He regularly contributes to Citrix's leading practices and documentation.
Yeah, all four.
Nice to see you, Michael.
All right, looks like it's just me that can't see the cameras. Hey, everyone.
Yeah.
All good. And Todd Shu is the president of Ferroque Systems. His previous consulting company, TH Consulting, was acquired by Citrix in 2012, and he became the director of Citrix Consulting Services Canada. Todd joined Ferroque in 2020, and the company is now one of only 2 Platinum Plus partners in Canada. Welcome, Todd. It's great to have you here. For nearly 2 decades, digital workspaces have been one of the most popular and secure means to deliver corporate resources, secure environments, and enable user productivity. They revolutionized the way people work and how organizations secure their sensitive data across a myriad of industries. Digital workspaces have their roots from traditional VDIs, evolved through DaaS, and now encompass the cloud PC era. What exactly is a cloud PC and how does it compare to DaaS and traditional VDI? These are some of the questions we're going to answer today. To start, we'll look at why cloud and why cloud PC. We'll get into the details of Workspot and how, as the original cloud PC, they were able to think outside the box. We'll dive into Workspot's unique capabilities, architecture, and use cases. We'll reveal why Workspot consistently outperforms its competition, being the most advanced cloud PC on the market. Workspot spans public clouds and on-premises data centers from a unified control plane and will turn almost everything you know about enterprise DaaS and VDI on its head. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll try to answer them as we go. But if we aren't able to do that, we'll for sure get to them at the end. So before I hand things over to Brad and Michael, I think it's important to understand the roots of Workspot. They have expert leadership. As you can see here, the CEO is Amitabh Sinha. Their Workspot chairman is Mark Templeton, the former CEO of Citrix Systems. They have Jimmy Chang on their team, and as well Brad Peterson, who we have here together. Some of their cloud partners is Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and Intel. What I wanted to point out is their NPS score. NPS score is a customer survey that measures how happy customers are with your solution. Most cloud companies are in the mid-20s. To provide some color, Google has an NPS score of 47, Apple a 72. So what a score of 80 signifies is that Workspot's customers love the service and would recommend it to their peers, a true testament to the Workspot team. So enough from me. I'm going to hand things over to Michael and Brad. I hope you guys enjoy the conversation about to happen.
Thank you, Amber. All right, so we're going to kick off with why cloud. And we're going to spend some time just revisiting cloud. Why are we talking about it? 10 plus years later. We'll hand that over to Brad here to talk us through a little bit why we're still talking about this now. And that's going to segue into what that does and means for VDI and cloud PC.
Yeah, sounds great. Hey, and by the way, Mike, thanks for joining us today. We are here at the Workspot corporate headquarters in, well, it should be sunny California, but it's actually a little rainy today, but it's in Campbell, California. And, it looks like we're kind of coming in from two places, but actually we're coming in from, the same table, right across from each other. You can see in the office here, and you can see out of the office there. Today, we are going to talk about a number of things. The first thing is why cloud, right? So a lot of folks that have history in VDI, or primarily, over the 10, 20 years that we've been working on this, they've been working on-prem, okay? And so now a lot of them are actually facing this notion, is it time to go to the cloud yet? And so, is it time to go to the cloud? As we do webinars a lot of time with our customers and share their success stories, we ask this polling question. Now, years ago, it wasn't really the case. They weren't really ready yet. But now there's a lot of evidence that would suggest it's time, that the cloud is ready, it's mature, and so forth. And so if you take a look at this, I got a couple examples here. We've got AWS. Of course, they've been out in the cloud business, first and foremost.
Started it more or less as far as scale, at least, yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks went there with server workloads and storage needs and various things like that. Now, today we're talking about end user computing and VDI, but it really wasn't that workload that actually went there at that time. But obviously, you can see the dots. They're around the world. They have a mature system here with 31 regions and 99 availability zones. And then hot on that trail of that is pretty much Azure. So about 4 or 5 years ago, this seemed to be becoming more mature out there with, you can see 66 regions and tons of points of presence around the world. And look at those multi-stranded fiber interconnects between those as well. It's time to leverage that. And then third is Google Cloud. So Google Cloud with their regions, their zones around the world, their fiber interconnects and so forth, they're all spending billions of dollars to make the cloud reliable and available as little resources that you can tap into and use for your needs. Now, originally it might have been server workloads and maybe, like I said before, so networking and storage.
So what's changed? What's changed where suddenly we're looking at this from a new light? Because again, cloud technology has been around for over 10 years now, evolving rapidly. Why is it now we're looking at it again and revisiting it from the perspective of a digital workspace?
Right. Okay, good. Now, and these three clouds we went over, Amazon actually came out with workspaces long ago, and that's a pretty large business for virtual desktops in the cloud, and it's more of a cloud PC-like scenario because it's really turnkey. You get the whole thing and you do the work, but it isn't super enterprise and it isn't really multi-region and so forth. There's extra work to do when you get involved in that. But the good news now is it's really across the board. The levels of certification and trust are so much higher, right? So gov, industry, regional, global certifications across all these clouds are so high.
Yeah, it's not a small list, that's for sure.
But no, and how could you maintain this level of, power and, availability and certification levels?
It's one of the main reasons people move to other SaaS services from Exchange on-prem or anything else. It's a huge workload and overhead that you now need to be responsible for maintaining your own data centers. Even if you're using a third-party data center or whatnot, there's still a lot that goes into ensuring that the services that you're running on there, from the hardware up, meet whatever various compliance requirements you need to abide by. So absolutely, a public cloud solves a lot of those issues. That's part of the value.
Yeah, and a good example is Exchange. Where's your email today, right? And where's your voice services today, right? And even before that, where's your CRM today? Clearly it all went into the cloud. So why is it VDI took so long to get there, right? And so that's what we really want to go into today. Now, is the cloud ready? To still answer this question, it was interesting. We were at the IGL Disrupt event in Munich about 6 weeks ago. And there was a particular speaker out there, his name was Mark Mills, and he studied this in great detail. He's a professor and a venture partner. And he wrote this book and he shared some of the material, and it talked about the 25-year adoption levels on various technologies that have come along.
Major technologies.
Major shifting technologies. And he found, regardless, over the 100 years that he looked, it was always about a 25-year period, a break-in period, where then it's like socially and economically and globally acceptable, and then it would take off. And so he's showing these curves, back in the electromechanical and the electronic, and then in the cloud space. And so what he's saying is the end of the beginning of cloud is here. Is it going to work? Is it the thing that we need? Do we want to use this going forward? The end of that beginning is already here. And now it's like he says, 1,000 times faster growth rate, exponential and beyond means, going over the next decade. So yes, it's time. It's time to adopt and sort of go full in. And when you do, there's another benefit here that's pretty substantial in this day and age, is the notion of sustainability.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. What does this mean?
Well, yeah, sustainability. So think about this. Think about provisioning. In the world of VDI, right, you are never perfectly provisioned. By definition, you are always either under provisioned or over provisioned.
Yeah, you're always taught and told, and if we're doing assessments, that you want to have a certain amount of capacity to accommodate for high availability or projected growth in the near term or whatnot. You're always supposed to be over provisioned, which does mean that you're not perfectly provisioned.
Yeah, you couldn't be. And if you acquired a company, now you're under provisioned, right? So it's like you could never be there. So the notion of cloud services is you're always perfectly provisioned because you consume exactly what you need when you need it. It's really up to Azure and Amazon and Google Cloud to actually have all those resources out there available for folks. But you as a company have the opportunity for the first time ever to be perfectly provisioned and to look at those costs in that way. If you add a new project, if you do an M&A, right, you bring these folks in, you can multiply the spreadsheet.
You're not adding a bunch of lead time that you need to plan for in advance and capital costs to make that happen.
No upfront capital costs, no 6 months of built-in of having nothing available while the guys in the back room are working on plumbing. The notion of getting it the fastest time to value and having yourself perfectly provisioned. Now, this also means that there's less waste, right? So you don't have 25 companies sitting next to each other that have 50% of their capacity not being used. So talk about sustainability, right? The wasted power and the resources to consume and recycle, all that stuff, it goes on and on. So this gentleman created this book, and I took a snapshot of the one slide that he shared that I thought was amazing, which is carbon emission reduction potential by moving from on-premises, by the way, it should be on-premises there, to cloud, right? And so imagine that. So you go from not provisioned at all correctly to perfectly provisioned and consuming it as you need it. And so there you go. It's kind of like, if you're living in a cul-de-sac or a neighborhood and everybody in the neighborhood has a skill saw, but they use it once a year, it's like you should really have one in the whole neighborhood and you just check it out and check it in, right? Why are you so over provisioned? Well, there's an opportunity for the whole
communal cloud.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's it. Tons of things to learn about the capacity, the reliability, the security levels, the provisioning, the just-in-time, the consumption, and so forth, and all that stuff really answers the question that kind of now is the time. The cloud is there. And by the way, we're not suggesting that you have to go to the cloud. If you still have resources on-prem that you've invested in, it's like, of course, stay with that. But when you are ready, the cloud is ready for you, right? It's like people used to be waiting on the computer. The computer was so slow, I'm waiting on the computer. Well, that's not the case anymore. The computer is always waiting on the human, right? And so when the human is ready to go, the computer is ready to zip. And so the cloud is ready now. If you're ready, it's there for you. So now that means we're going through the most interesting transition ever in humanity, in our humanity, which is full on-prem yesterday to full cloud in 5, 10, 3, 6, 9, who knows how many years, right? Well, if that's the case, and that's what the probabilities would suggest, then we are actually at this point of transition, which is the coolest thing ever. So how do I transition? If I'm on-prem, how do I get into the cloud, right? And so that's where we come up with the term cloud PC. Right.
And cloud PC is a new concept. So really, what's the definition of a cloud PC? Like, is this another gimmicky marketing term that we've heard for 2 years now? Is there actually a real differentiator between that and an actual VDI? Where's the delineation point?
Well, first, you have to have a gimmicky marketing term that catches on so people don't forget it.
Like perfectly provisioned.
Yes, perfectly provisioned. Exactly. That's another good one. We got more coming too, by the way. But cloud PC is something that's easy to remember, but it actually really represents something interesting, right? If you take a look at 600 million PCs around the planet that are, shipped and configured and delivered and maintained and replaced and all that stuff, refreshed, it's like there's emotion there. The IT organization knows how to install OS and antivirus and then patch it and They know how to do that. And so the world of VDI was very different because when you had VDI set up, it was more infrastructure than it was desktop, right? There was way more infrastructure than
tons of infrastructure, tons of engineering.
Yeah, and then all the patches. It's like, oh wait, let's make this non-persistent.
Yeah,
and then let's
and then the models, exactly that. There was desktops. VDI was very expensive, so if we had 10,000 users, how do we get 10,000 desktops to make them available? Well, in the traditional model, you would originally start out doing full persistent systems, but that meant you had a ton of costs to deal with. So the idea non-persistent came up, right? And non-persistent was great, got fewer images to manage, wonderful. We can develop this so maybe we got 10,000 users, but only 7,000 are active at any given time at peak. Well, we're going to size that environment accordingly to accommodate that. Great savings, wonderful. But now we've got all these other problems that come up. How do we manage our applications in this model? How are we dealing with our profiles? Now suddenly we're starting to layer on all these additional technologies, capabilities that are only available in a certain premium license to start providing that. So we were driven away from persistent VDI in the enterprise to a non-persistent, generally by cost and trying to simplify things as well, admin overhead, only to add a bunch more complexity and cost for all the fun little bells and whistles and tools that all the engineering teams like to deal with, to compensate for things that have now shifted. So
and everybody on the call is resonating with everything you just said, because they had.
You got to take a step back. You got to take a step back and go, wait, we've been loving. I love my app layering. I love this. I love that. I love my FS Logic. So this and that. But we got to look at where the genesis of all that came from. Where did that all end up getting driven from? Non-persistency.
So far away from the point in which it started. And so that's the question. The folks you hire for IT, for VDI and all that stuff, are they the same people that are the people doing desktop delivery, just physical? No, they're totally different skill sets, entirely different. And so cloud PC is actually getting back to what the PC was originally, right? And still is in a physical form. It's the notion of delivering it in the simplest possible way in a cloud instead of in the wrapper of a laptop. So it is the persistent desktop. And it is in a way that you can give it to anyone in the world and they can connect in and click and get great performance, which is all the stuff we're going to talk about today. And so it more resembles that. So the folks that are actually in the IT organization with cloud PCs are kind of the same people and the same skills with the physical PCs, except they're not in the break-fix world anymore. That part is gone. Right? And so that's quite a good thing. So that's the notion of cloud PC.
And I guess the other thing about cloud PC too is just what's really changed the game here, especially as we'll talk a little bit persistency a bit later on as well, because there's obviously a lot of controversy on that, but that's really at the heart of cloud PC is for persistent commodity Windows sessions is cost. There's been evolutions in cost models or whatnot now with various technology platforms and public clouds where suddenly you can go ahead and make persistent desktops ridiculously cost effective. And suddenly the need for, hey, we need all this other complexity over here. That starts to diminish in terms of its value now that we can get the cost problem solved.
That's right, cost. Cost is an amazing thing, and we're going to talk about that as we talk about how you deliver a cloud PC and who's paying for which portion of it, because there's the control plane and there's the actual VM. And who's got the best performance for that VM in that part of the world, and who's got the best discount against that as well. And you can start playing those games so that you always get the best cost, but you always give a persistent, simple, easy to use desktop. And by the way, just a disclaimer here, Workspot, Ferroque together deliver non-persistent app virtualization, shared hosted desktops, GPU accelerated, the whole deal, right? It's just, it could be that the sweet spot in many cases is this persistent desktop, which makes it pretty easy and very similar to the old PC model. It doesn't mean that when app virtualization is the way to go, you try to shove a desktop down. No, you give them app virt, right? And non-persistent is great for task workers and things and so on and so on. So it's all covered.
No, there's still use cases for that, right? I mean, immutable desktops, folks that need to restore things to a pristine state, various security models. So I think one of the key things here about cloud PC is just the time to value. The time to value, you turn them on, you provision them as you need them, you're good to go. And I think time to value is an important piece there because originally it was touted as VDI was originally historically touted as a cost-saving initiative back when VDI first was making all the headlines. And very quickly, we all discovered collectively in the industry, well, no, the VDI is not actually there to save money. It's there largely to be business enablers, right? But now we actually are able to start stepping back on that because cloud PC actually can do both.
It is. And when you think about why it was driven, in many cases, it was use cases, right? Obviously, the call center is a great use case. The software developer, the remote worker is a great use case. The medical field, technicians and bringing up patient medical records, those are all great use cases. It always made sense to centralize and virtualize and secure the content and make it available under a way more secured model than actually handing out laptops filled with data and wondering where they are, right? And so clearly that's the case. Now, what is different is, and you can see the slide here in the very first bullet, like I would suggest if you're looking for a cloud PC, this is your hit list, right? These 7 things are your demands, essentially. Okay, so the first thing, fast time to value. Well, we know in the VDI world, and to be fair, 10 or 15 years ago, this is the only way you could do it. There weren't clouds really then. You had to take the software on yourself, and you had to staff, and you had to install and maintain and build, and you were awake nights and weekends if that thing ever glitched, right? And it may have on occasion, right? So now the difference is you can actually click a button and consume this out of the cloud, and your IT organization isn't focused on the plumbing anymore. They're focused on where they need those desktops in the world next to the users that are key to consume those desktops and function in those roles. Fastest possible time to value. And you don't have to say, I need 10,000 desktops, so let me spend this amount of money and spend this amount of months building it out. You could say, I need 1,000 now, and I need 4,000 next week, and I need 6,000 the following week, and they're all in different locations. It's just like land, expand use cases, and grow it as you need it, when you need it.
Actual elasticity.
Elasticity, exactly. And then if you have a reduction in need, you have reduction in consumption as well, which you could never do before.
Yeah.
So the fast time to value, as well as the kind of the perfect provisioning thing, comes back in here too, right? Now, the notion of performance is a wonderful thing, because what you do on your use cases too, you figure out who's doing this and what applications are they using and what data, consumption speeds do they need, and you can tune the VM accordingly. So it is a 8x60, 8x32, is it a 4x16
You need a GPU, you're right sizing it for the use case. Yeah,
exactly. And then the other thing you do is you drop it in proximity to the user.
Yeah, so we're going to circle back to that, because that's another piece of the puzzle that is, there's different schools of thoughts on this. We'll circle back to that later on too. But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because there's some fun math to do there, because everything's a variable. Every customer is slightly different. The kind of the overriding kind of rule of thumb is, if you can get in close proximity to them, wherever they are in the world, they're in Singapore, they're in London, they're in New York, and so forth. We saw the clouds a little while ago. We can tap into any one of the Amazon and Google and Azure clouds and drop that in close to them. So now the end user is like 15 to 20 milliseconds away from them.
Yeah, the faster the user can get to the desktop or whatnot, the better off they are, regardless of where the application data is, whether it's local there or somewhere else. You're going to ride a highway to wherever the data is versus taking the back roads directly from the user, wherever the VDI is hosted.
Oh, yeah.
Which we see as a core use case on, when we're dealing with customers over the internet with offshore users. Very common. They're terminating their sessions in North America or whatnot versus be able to hop on a fast on-ramp, more local, and riding that path.
Exactly. And so when we get into the architectural diagrams coming up, we can draw some of those details out of that. And we can have some examples of some customer success stories and how they've done that as well. So performance is key. Reliability is key. So you know what you can do in this case? If I can provision a desktop, like when I need it on consumption, I can actually provision a backup desktop and a backup to the backup desktop as well. So now I've got business continuity, I've got disaster recovery, I've got forms of ransomware recovery also that we can bake into this architecture that they could never do before. We have something called the global desktop, which makes that seamless. The user gets a single icon, they click. If their primary is up, hallelujah. If it's not, boom. The client is smart enough to know to go and find its alternative, and it could be on another cloud. It could be on the private cloud, on-prem. It could be almost anywhere. So reliability.
Replicate in the back end. That's where still there's some engineering talent that comes into play there, but the solutions can be designed in such a way to provide that level of high availability as well as preference for the user with intelligent built-in, so that desktop's following them wherever they're traveling around the world for the optimal performance.
Feels like
that's cool.
It feels
no one's doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It comes up to the architecture, because you could do that with brute force with other architectures, but our architecture allows you actually to configure it.
It's building out, reinventing the wheel, and hiring rocket scientists to make it happen.
Yeah. And when we get into the architecture, you'll see how it's built that allows that. So we should skim through this pretty quick and get into that. But I tell you what, for the rest of these, proactive troubleshooting. The challenges in the old world of dropping off VDI on-prem and relying on the customers and the partners to figure it out is those were islands of installations. Those were separate islands. But imagine if you're in a world where it's actually cloud-based and cloud-controlled, and you have access in a multi-tenant environment to every single customer and every single gateway and every single VM and every single client.
Yeah.
It's like the insight you can have when you have that sort of visibility allows you to troubleshoot anything. We've found issues on the, not to pick on Azure, but on their network that looked haywire across multiple of our customers and informed them, and so we got to them of a problem they had before they even knew it. The same thing happened with a customer where we found some weird behavior on their VMs as well, and their clients, alerted them to it, and they were right in the middle of a ransomware hit.
So just to be clear, that's amazing, but you're able to actually gather this from some high-level metametrics of some sort. You're not seeing what the customers are doing. You've got no, based on the architecture of Workspot, for example, you can't see into the customer systems like that, nor do you want to. There's full
No.
separation, right?
We wouldn't want to. I think there's other third-party products customers can choose to dig in at that level if they choose.
But you're focusing on usage patterns that are abnormal that allow you to apply some intelligence to them.
That's right. We're about connectivity. We're about network performance. We're about, you know, unit performance of the nodes that we're talking about. Those sorts of things. Just in those heuristics alone, we can tell what's happening and get to customers proactively. You could never do this before. And we knew this years ago when we built the architecture, that this is what we were destined for. That once we got, you know, thousands and thousands and even more under one, you know, sort of mechanism, and you had a line of sight to all that, the security insight you had would be second to none in the world. And so we can, all of our customers benefit from that. Cloud cost optimizations, as we talked about before, it's wonderful that we can do, you know, hibernation if we need to, consumption, hourly consumption here. We can do best performance on this cloud or that cloud in this region and get those costs optimized and make it perfectly provisioned and consumable. And so again, you can hit levels of productivity at certain lower expense levels that you could never hit before either. Now we have as we're focused on all this stuff, we're always focused on the end user and their experience as well, and so we can tell what that is. And when anyone disconnects from the Workspot client, it comes up and it asks them, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, how was your experience? Put some notes in here, and think about all the folks around the world that are closing out and adding notes into their experience.
Yeah, and that can get aggregated or whatnot and feed into some investigations necessary.
It feeds into our real-time monitoring system, and it also feeds into our trending system, so we can see how it's trending over time. Is it like we did an M&A? What happened? Oh, right after the M&A, there was super happiness, and then there was super non-happiness. What happened there, right? Oh, there was a shift in a thing and whatever. And so we go into that and we find those trends and the real-time combinations that allow us to get, well, this is again the NPS score of 80. Right? It's like we're doing things
hyper proactive. Yeah.
Folks can never do this before. Center of Excellence actually summarizes this whole thing. The Center of Excellence is our customer success team, which is an extension of our customer's IT organization. The CIO, you know, on all levels, networking and security, and you know, desktops and various and so forth. We are an extension on all those dimensions to them as a trusted partner. Connect with them all the time. Very important to us. And again, another reason for the 80 NPS score. All right, cool. All right, so that's that. From there, you know, what we can do is we can dig into the specifics of, you know, VDI and the transition in the cloud PC and the architecture underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. Now, just, you know, we're going into this from a technology perspective. So this isn't a sales or marketing call right now, right? But I like to share this level of detail because a lot of folks just come to us and they go, you know, I hadn't heard of Workspot before. I don't have the details. How is it different? What's going on under the hood? And that's what this next section is for. Okay. All right. And by the way, if you got questions, you know, write those questions down, put them in the question box. You know, we can field them throughout. We'll certainly field them at the end if we don't get them throughout the presentation. All right. All right. Now, you know, this first section here is just to talk about the transition, and then we'll go into the architecture. The notion is there's a lot of folks out there, and historically, that have been like this, and I'm very familiar with this world. As I
in my career on it.
We all built our careers on this for sure. So it's the control plane, and then it's like, where are the VMs, you know? And for cost containment, you know, believe it or not, 20 years ago, folks had, you know, they were proud of multiple data centers around the world. And all of a sudden, well, that became expensive. So they started to reduce them down to 2, and then some people reduced them down to 1 data center.
Wait, we're back to having, you know, geo problems, and now we're back to having DRBCP problems.
Yeah, right. And so now you're like, okay, I'm cutting costs, but now my users that are 400 milliseconds away are super not happy, and many reasons. There's issues there. And so what are we talking about here? We're talking about the notion of, okay, wait a minute. I got a control plane and I got VMs. So what if I flipped my control plane so that it was global and scalable and microservices based and all that sort of stuff? And so I didn't have to actually ever install it or tune it or upgrade it or maintain it or license it or cert it and like that. It's like it was a service. Well, that's pretty cool. And if you still want your VMs on-prem because you've got, you know, your infrastructure there and it's not amortized out yet, it's depreciated and so forth, well, hallelujah. You know, the Workspot can certainly work in that space. And then the obvious space also is that, you know, it'll go to the cloud also. So the VMs could be on the cloud. Now, this is why we call it Cloud PC.
Yeah, because a Cloud PC, but to me, would immediately go, okay, Cloud PC, it exists in the public cloud. But is that really the case? Does it have to only live on the public cloud?
Right. No, it doesn't. And in fact, you can see here, it lives on the other cloud, the private cloud. And by the way, if I had a polling mechanism, I would put it out right now and say, do you refer to your on-prem data center as on-prem or private cloud?
It was, you know what, it was a thing for a while. VMware made a huge play at it or whatnot. I still run into some enterprise customers that do still refer to it as private cloud, but not as much. But regardless of what you call it, can you do cloud PC on-prem?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can. And in fact, I think just based on your history lesson here, you guys actually started out with that being on-prem initially, with a cloud-hosted control plane. And let's be clear here, it's an actual cloud-hosted control plane that is infrastructure as code, microservices, what have you. I know you'll go through that, but this isn't something just shoved in a public cloud that's really the same product that's just have a different label on it. It's actually a cloud-native platform. But you are able to have a single control plane that can span not a cloud, multiple clouds, as well as your on-prem infrastructure, for flexibility and use cases. Although we're talking about the acceleration of cloud, there's a lot of people still growing up now going, great, is cloud good for all of my use cases? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So there's some discussions that are being had with some customers may move things back on-prem in certain capacities. Some stuff may continue to move towards cloud. And what we're looking for in our platforms generally with our customers are asking for is flexibility, right? Flexibility for deployment.
Yeah, and consistency too, and no lift and shift anymore. You know, those days are gone. If you have a monolithic brokering architecture and you try to move it into the cloud, it's just going to be copies of that for each customer, right? And so that doesn't really work. So no, you want a massively scalable multi-tenant, architecture built for this specifically, never retrofitted. But from the beginning of time, the Workspot architecture was always built multi-tenant, microservices based, global, right? Scalable. And so if you look at this, it's like, here you go. It's like you might use the Workspot control plane on top of your VMs on-prem, and then you might move, like you said, use case based or whatever to the cloud, but you could have it at the same time also. And that's the beauty of it. In a single administrative console, you're actually managing the VMs that are on-prem in your private cloud and all the VMs that are actually in any one of the public clouds as well. So you can transition between that super easy. There's no lift and shift. There's no forklift involved, smooth, and it's up to you as to when you go. Yeah, and like you said, we have customers that are doing that exactly today. We have, all customers with on-prem VMs and customers with cloud VMs. Call it cloud PC shouldn't be a scary term if you're not in the cloud yet, because if you
certain other cloud PCs are truly like literally only a cloud capable of cloud PC, public cloud PC, but we've got options here, which is nice.
And that's important to know the difference. All right, hey, let's jump into the architecture, right? So the first thing here, when you take a look at what is Workspot, is the Workspot cloud itself. Like I said, believe it or not, 10 years ago, some folks that came out of Citrix and even some VMware and even some Microsoft came together to build an architecture that was actually pure cloud-based, because we knew back then that the cloud was here. Right? You can see Salesforce.
And everyone else is doing it. Sales Siebel to Salesforce, and Remedy to ServiceNow. There hadn't been anything for VDI at the time you guys had started.
That's right. Yeah, there hadn't. And so that was the interesting insight, was should we be bold enough? And I wasn't there at the time. It was Amitabh Sinha and his folks. I came in 7 years ago to Workspot, but 3 years after they kicked this off. Actually, during that time, I went to DocuSign, and I went to school on the cloud. 60,000 new users a day on DocuSign. As contracts went out, you didn't have to have an account to just sign it, but you had to actually be connected to it, and so they could see all these users coming. So the architecture associated with cloud, the scalability, the globalness, the marketing, the sales elements of those, I just went to school over there. So I came out of there and I go to Workspot and I go, oh my God, this is my history of VDI combined with DocuSign, which is cloud enabling it and then running crazy with it. And so that's what we've been doing now. So it makes tons of sense. So if you look at this list here, though, it's cloud PC delivery. And again, on-prem or in the cloud is where the VM is, but the control plane is all in the cloud. And the control plane is globally scalable, and it is also cloud native. It has always been cloud native. Microservices, when you build it with microservices, as new demands come in, services get spawned up, right? And so they're auto-scaling and they're auto-healing. If something crashes, another one comes up and takes its place. It's a beautiful thing. Totally scalable, and it's always been multi-tenant is the idea. So now we have visibility and vision across all customers. And as we go through this, you'll see what we're looking at when we do that, okay? So now, as we did this years ago, there weren't really clouds available to do the VM part of it, and so we were on-prem. This little block here is an example of a user on-prem and a vSphere as an example, as a hypervisor. And so from that, Workspot in the cloud reaches down in, and its control plane actually configures the VM and the gateway and the actual client. Those three things. Now those three things know what to do. The VM's there, security policies are all in place, the gateway's set up and ready for authentication, your traffic, right? And the client knows where to go. So when it clicks the icon, it goes straight in. And that's what happens here. So now you got the data plane. So what's key to this architecture, in addition to many things, is the control plane and the data plane are totally separate. And they don't clog each other up. And they're both built for the highest level of security and performance. So the end user is going straight into the VM, and the stream is coming straight back to them as it's streaming to their screen. All right, and then much the same way for the folks that are outside the company, which is obviously the case. These folks come in, the control plane configures their client. You can see the dotted line, and now they know exactly how to hit the data plane and go and hit their VM, away they go. Okay, and you can see all the notes there. Clients are doing posture checking, intelligent load balancing, and those sorts of things. And the control plane is SOC 2. It's doing all the configuration and the monitoring. The data and control plane is separate. That's key.
Yeah,
right?
And that's another unique attribute as well. It's largely driven by security, if I recall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get the security from that, but also performance, because there's obviously, if you break down other architectures where they mix control and data planes all up.
Yeah, I can think of others where it's part of the service, but it's still using an aggregated shared service to be proxying securely sessions through different points of presence around a globe. In this architecture, which is a bit unique, everyone's getting their own dedicated services for that connection brokering.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in each cloud or on-prem, there's a dedicated RD gateway that's dropped in for them as a customer.
Yeah.
And by the way,
that scales out, right?
It's redundant, it's clustered, so it has redundancy built in, and it has clustering built in, so that if there's volumes, of like thousands of folks coming through, it's built for that, right? Yeah, exactly. So now, if we could do that, about 4.5 years ago, some customers came to us and said, hey, can we do this in Azure? So it's like, okay, the cloud's ready and the demand is there. So we started dropping the VMs in Azure and doing the same thing. And look at the model. Control plane comes in. What does it do? It talks directly into Azure through APIs and configures the hypervisor to get to the VMs. It configures those. Security policies are all set. RD gateways configured. The clients are configured. So those folks come in and hit that too. And what happens next? GCP. Right? So we go into GCP and we go into their cloud. Again, driven by customer demand, opportunistic, and the architectures are different in these clouds, but similar enough for us to add those elements in, and now they all behave from a Workspot perspective.
It gives customers choice. I mean, we have many customers that use multiple clouds for various reasons. They have a multi-cloud strategy, and some it may be related to resiliency. But in many cases, really, it's about being able to access best-of-breed technologies. Right?
Yes.
So
yeah, and in the location that's nearest, and where's the GPU that's best?
Yeah, who's got the best GPU, or maybe the GPU cost? Who's got where are we hosting our data lake for various reasons? That's just a technology cost, whatever it is, and we need to give a VM footprint over there, a VDI footprint, cloud PC footprint over there, and this gives you the flexibility.
Yeah, and that's right, cloud PC. Yeah, we don't use VDI so much. And so now the latest and greatest one is AWS. So now we're working with them. It's odd that it was sort of in that order, but it's in that order.
Yep, newly on board, and that's using which AWS service?
Well, Workspaces and Workspaces
Core. So we're doing an overlay with Workspot on top of Workspaces Core to augment the Workspaces core intelligence capabilities. Gotcha.
Exactly. The short story there is that Workspaces has done an amazing, huge business over these last many years that's driving that actual service, Workspaces. And it's primarily it's kind of single region and persistent desktop focused, right? And so what they have underneath Workspaces is they got Workspaces Core, which is the API level. So from us, and even from others, they've encouraged us to come in and use those APIs and launch persistent out of there. But what we can also do is go straight to EC2 and do non-persistent and AppVert. And then from there, we could also do on-prem too.
Yep.
So now we can help AWS actually win even more business, retain those customers that they have that are doing server workloads on AWS. And they want now to go to desktop virtualization, and they have broad needs. Well, Workspaces didn't cover all the needs necessarily. Workspot comes in as a partner of theirs, covers these needs, and keeps them in the AWS family. But now you can see here we are. So we've got Amazon, Google, and Azure, and vSphere, and we got to figure out some name for that that's shorter and just more catchy, I think we'll think of that next week at the event for sure. So that's it. You know, they're all playing nicely in this. And what I want to do now is click to this transition slide, because it's like, if you're doing that and you've got on-prem and the 3 clouds, so it's really 4 clouds, it's private cloud and public clouds, then what are the use cases? Now, these are all pretty straightforward. Most of these are like contractors. Well, that's pretty easy. You got a contract, you drop them into a desktop and they love it. M&A, I don't even have listed here, but it's wonderful because.
Oh yeah, so thanks for coming on board. Here's your cloud PC. Boom, next day you're off ready to the races. Work on the application transition at the end. I mean, the reality, digital workspace technologies is what I've seen power the speed of M&A of some of the largest North American insurance companies. I've seen it firsthand. So.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's just further one-ups that, because it's just in time. It's perfect provisioning. It's there. You're not spending months forward planning, capacity planning this infrastructure.
Or trying to wrestle every single desktop in that company onto a new domain.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It's like, what? No, you just pop them into a new, from that very desktop, they actually connect securely into a brand new desktop in the cloud.
IT manages everything, transitioning everything else in parallel in the back end.
That's it.
Yeah,
Great.
not shipping out brand new PCs and laptops, whatnot on day one.
No. And so then they're focused on the business and getting that acquired, business actually online and productive. So yeah, it's win all the way to the boardroom. So you got call centers, obviously software developers. Now, some folks, when they see 3D CAD developers, they might be surprised. So here's the deal: we were surprised too.
It's one of your largest success stories is in that space specifically, the GPU powered workloads.
Yeah, but we all know over the years of trying to do this in VDI, it was impossible because it was too expensive. You couldn't get it right. The latency was a killer when you're trying to rotate, 3D models and stuff. And then we found, some folks came to us and we said, okay, let's do that.
Not even just folks. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've had public clouds that have their own desktop solutions that have said, no, these use cases, this has got to go to Workspot.
Yeah.
There's something that you guys are doing differently that is just providing a much better user experience and value to those users.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's the case. And so we're able to put configure cloud workstations in this case, GPU accelerated with right sort of memory and GPU and CPU, virtual CPU and so forth, and get super high speed access to the large data models because they're pulling in multi-gig files. But when you're doing it over the fiber backbone, on Azure or the other networks, that stuff opens and closes faster than it ever has before.
Yeah, you're not taking the back roads through the internet or through a zillion hops.
Well, alternatively, if they wanted to work at home and they had a high-powered, liquid-cooled laptop and so forth, they still had to go on a VPN connection to pull the data in. Yeah. That's not going to work.
Yeah, there's no matter what, you're not going to solve the problem of distance. You can certainly make it dramatically more efficient, but you need to have the right tools in place.
And so, it's funny because we got this started just before the lockdown, and a bunch of folks seeded with the idea. Yeah. And once the lockdown hit, they all just turned up the burners and they just said wall to wall, just give us all these. And everybody went home. And the engineers and the designers that went home actually said, I don't want to go back to work. I don't have that hour commute in the morning and that hour commute in the evening anymore. And I have more flexibility with having dinner at 5 with the family and then working till 9:30 at night on my projects and stuff. They saw productivity go up because it's all billable hours, right? So it worked. And so, yes, it was crazy. We didn't anticipate it, but we get the desktop in such close proximity to the user that they're 15 to 20 milliseconds away and they're rotating the model on multiple screens.
And the hardware needed to support distributed computing like that with GPUs in them, they're expensive. We worked with a number of with engineering firms where that was one of their biggest problems. They had to bring in a digital workspace solution with GPU capabilities to solve that multi-million-dollar issue.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so we were surprised. And I tell you what, why don't we just right now, why don't I pop straight into the demo and show you that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, want to see that? Cool. All right, so what I can do here is launch a Workspot client on my side. And it comes as soon as I authenticate here.
Is it switched over yet?
Well, you're going to see it in just a second. Okay. What I have to do is when it comes up with the dialog box in front, authenticate, I can't move the primary window. So the dialog box is done, right? So, but I'm going to do the two-factor authentication that I have here.
Several seconds later.
Yes, exactly. Boop, boop. Okay, so now we are authenticated. Now I can haul it over here because the dialog box is gone. All right, so this is the Workspot client, right? I'm on Windows, so this is the Windows native version.
You've got clients for everything, right? I mean, pretty much everything. Oh, yeah. Windows, Mac, Chrome OS, iOS, Android,
yeah, and
Linux,
then,
iGel.
iGel as well. Yeah. So anywhere. And then if you're just nowhere, you just, like you said, Chrome, you open a browser, you pop in as well.
Browser, good to go.
We really enhanced the browser-based performance. It's comparable to the cloud or the OS native, but when you're on the OS, use the OS native and away you go, but you got the browser as well. So this shows me when I'm connected in, I got 2 icons, so I can connect into 2 different desktops in 2 different areas. And if I click on the icon right here, this will get me into a AMD GPU accelerated cloud workstation that I got, right? And so you can see it's connecting into the cloud, and this is up and running for me. So as I connect, my software is still there. So I got a few things open on here, just example little, as I pop this in, example applications, kind of a financial application here. You can go grab stock symbols and go and interact with those. Simple to see that I've got, let's go to the Eiffel Tower. I got Google Earth here because, is there a day that goes by that you don't open Google Earth and go?
No, this is the exact same way I start my day. I open up and look at stocks, and I start flying around the world in Google Earth.
Yeah,
I think everyone does that.
Exactly, and then I'm sure right after that you probably open a Revit model so that you can, do go
every day,
some 3D modeling
every day.
So check this out. Now this is crazy or what? And this is what we do like in trade shows. And
by the way, this coming through like a go-to-meeting session. It's just actually pretty snappy.
Yeah. You can see, as I'm moving the mouse and I'm zooming in and so forth and rotating around, it's like on my, right on my mouse. And so these folks go home and they go, no, this is not going to work. And then they go home and they go, oh, this is like, wait a minute, this is almost exactly like when I was in the office. In fact, it's better because when I open my files and I write them out and I close them, it's faster. And so then they don't have the commute as well. And they're going, listen, all I need is like some extra monitors. And then they
I'll use some extra monitors, a proper internet connection,
Yeah, and it's
hopefully need on 5 kids streaming Netflix at the same time.
Well, true, but hey, it's like H.264 compression, so it's kind of like a mini Netflix movie coming down as you're moving it, and it's intelligent, so it only uses that part of the screen that it's H.264s. So that's pretty much it, and I'll let you in a little secret here. Okay, so you see this tab up top here? If I hover over the connection, it tells us a little bit about our connection. Now it might be small, but it says 4.5 megabits per second and 141 milliseconds latency.
141 milliseconds latency.
Yeah,
that's where are you running this thing?
Well, see, that's the thing. We were in Munich a couple of weeks ago, and so I set this up in London. This is GPU accelerated Azure Desktop in London that we used for the demos there. It's still running over there. I figured we'd use it for the webinar. And look at that. I mean, we wouldn't set it up this way for a customer, right? But I mean, I'm working in here and it's almost flawless, and it's still, sort of half a globe away.
Exactly.
And so when we set this up for our end users, it's literally in the same, within the same region. And so they're seeing sometimes 15, 17 millisecond latency, and they can't find any delay in it.
Yeah, because what's part of it, again, it goes part of the ethos here and the ideologies is, no matter what, you put the user experience first. You're keeping the VDIs, cloud PCs. It's going to die hard. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. Cloud PC, you're going to keep close to the users wherever they are geographically. That point of presence is right next to them. No aggregated, shared, hokey stuff like that. It's dedicated for that customer in that area.
Yeah.
And psychologically to the user, that's going to provide the best possible experience. It's the lowest latency. You're hitting the keyboard. You're moving the mouse. It's happening because even when there's latency slowdown, you do pick up on it, even if you're not consciously aware of it. You see it, and that does inform an element of your user experience perception. Yes, you're removing that. That's pretty much you're keeping it as local as possible.
Yeah, so it's not a protocol bar anymore. Right? Yeah, because it's right there, and so you get.
But it's not just the desktops right there. The already gateways there, right next to it. That's a big differentiator.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, exactly. So it's the shortest path of networking as well. Like networking, it's not around and so forth. And so there, we see like 3 points of the triangle here being key is the end user's happiness.
Yeah.
And that's end user experience and performance, productivity, and all that. And then the IT organization. So they don't have to build this stuff out, pay a bunch of money.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too, right? I mean, everything we're talking about, proximity and this and that and the other, these are things that people can do with existing VDI technology platforms. You can do that, optimal gateway routing and this and these other things to do those things, but it's not necessarily there by default out of the box per se. There is some point of presence considerations that come into mind, but there is also, it's not as clean as you would like it to be, and those are also shared. These are just out of the box deployed, boom. We keep it close to the user. The gateways are close to the user automatically. It's dedicated to the customer. And that does make a significant difference.
Yeah.
And that's just out of the box. That's just the way things are done.
Right. And if you try to do it on your own, try doing it across 7 regions globally.
Yeah.
For an international customer.
You've got customers that are doing that very thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
7, 8 regions around the world, stuff dropped in, all managed from one place, monitored all from one place as well, seamlessly, right? And so those 3 areas is end user experience is key, the IT organization being able to view this, on it with consumption and high level security. And then the third piece is the CFO, is that financially, that it makes sense. And so this makes this discussion makes its way to the boardroom, and they see the strategic advantage. There's advantages from productivity reasons. There's hiring reasons. Like I don't have to lose employees that are moving. Who cares where you're moving to? I can hire talent from anywhere. Could be at a lower scale and so forth. So there's the finance, and there's the security, and then there's the end user experience. Those legs are key, and you can address all those. We talked about this earlier, is the notion of persistent, non-persistent apps, hosted, shared, GPU, whatever you need, right? We'll dial it in. The good news is you don't have to run away scared from a persistent desktop anymore, right? Yeah. Those things are there, and they're affordable, and their simplicity is
yes. So you're bringing back the simplicity. There is admin overhead that will come back because you're managing things one-to-one again with SCCM or Intune or whatever your tool of choice is.
Right.
But you're keeping it simple, and you're able to keep it simple again because you remove the cost element with these cloud PC technologies in place. A lot of that need for the full capacity and persistency. Being able to power these things down when they're not in use or whatnot, it just changes how we've looked at traditional digital workspaces over the last 10+ years.
That's right. It's
persistent becomes viable again.
Consumption-based, perfectly provisioned. We're going to have to come up with a couple of new words here that just dials it right in. It dials it in to a point where you're getting what you need for the business, and you're never overpaying for stuff that you're not using, that's idly running there. It's like when the car is at the stoplight and it's idling, right? Now, even gas-powered cars have figured that out nowadays. They shut off the car, and then when you're ready to go, it starts the car, and away you go. Even cars are now smart enough to do consumption-based, right? Not let alone electric cars, right? But yeah, so there you go. That's an interesting analogy. That one just came out. All right. Hey, and so by the way, this can be fully turnkey, and it's a BYO VM. Of course, on-prem, you got your own VMs, but even in the cloud, if you've got some large commit to a cloud and you want to burn that commit down, well, VMs for your desktops. You take that with the Workspot together, and Ferroque as the partner pulling the services.
And you can transact through, Workspot can transact through
the marketplace.
Yeah, the marketplaces as well.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly. All right. So this transitions us to another slide, which is key, which is, if you're going to do all this, you better be able to see it real time and also run trend analysis against it. And that's what this is here. Workspot Watch, real-time alarms on things you should know. And trending is behaviors over time that allows you to predict things in the future, so you can make course adjustments and adjust to make things even more beneficial in the future. All right, and this is something we talked about a little earlier. This highlights that, and that is the notion of the global desktop. Now, look at the bottom of the screen here. That user actually has a single icon. I had 2 icons on my desktop, but imagine you just got one desktop and you click it. Well, that click would go over, as you can see on the left side of the screen, to Microsoft Azure. That's my primary desktop. But if it's not there, the client is intelligent enough to flip over to its backup, which is over in even another cloud.
And will the user be able to get their data? Well, the platform is designed properly or whatnot in the back end by the engineers that are still being employed by the customer to maintain the images and support the end user experience, for sure. I mean, this is why we've got technologies like FS Logics and the like out now. They've solved a lot of those problems that we've had historically with user profiles or whatnot by introducing things like Cloud Cache, right? You don't necessarily need to have you can still do persistent desktops and still have profile roaming capabilities and containerization technologies like that to support models like this. So you're containerizing as much of the user experience and personalization as possible, whereas we're using the desktop itself as just a conduit and a medium to enable business productivity to exist. Containerize everything else, manage the applications across the desktop, switch them all down, the experience is consistent, and just simplify the desktop layer as much as possible.
When I used to run the executive briefing center at Citrix, as I did for 10 years, I would always ask folks when they came in this question, this pop question. I'd say, what's the most important thing of these 3? Is it the applications or the operating system or the data? Which one's most important?
And could I give you an answer?
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, the answer is the data, because guess what? The operating system is just, or the application is the way to interface with the data, but the operating system is just there to actually run the application that's there to interface with the data. But the data is the only important piece. The data, if the building was burning down, what would you run out of the building with? The data. You don't care about the OS or the apps. Who cares? It's the data, right? And so when you look at this model, that's the key, right? It's the data that's taken care of and protected. But the operating system and the applications could come from anywhere. I don't care if it's coming out of this cloud or that cloud, or if it's this country or that country.
Well, maybe.
Well, data sovereignty.
Yes.
But that brings us to the right-hand side of the slide here, and that is like the traveling executive.
Yeah.
Well, can it follow me? Well, guess what? We talked about this earlier. In this architecture, it can follow you.
Yeah, who the heck else is doing that? Who the heck else can say, great, I'm going to be flying out to London tomorrow, and boom, my desktop shows up, and now everything's there, set, ready to go, and now it's local to me in London now, suddenly. Everything picking up just as where I left off.
Very naturally, right? And again, the data is, if the data is managed so it can be accessible to these places, then the OS and the applications can be variable.
And you guys are using that through the back-end cloud technologies that are available in these clouds to make that happen.
That's the thing. Yeah, the multi-stranded fiber interconnects to get you terabit connections, so faster than ever. Exactly. All right. Well, we're going to keep cranking because we're running low on time in this wonderful webinar here. This just shows what we were talking about. We're doing this around the world. Customers will come in and we'll connect in with them and we'll drop in those, whether it's on a private cloud or public cloud around the world. And then the architecture looks like this. So if you zoom into this just a little bit more, you'll see, the Workspot cloud is here and the control plane is configuring. It's always configuring three things. It's connecting in through APIs into the cloud to go and configure the virtual machines as well as the RD gateway. And it'll also do the same down here on-prem. It'll go in and connect into, say, vSphere as an example, talks to other hypervisors, as well as the RD gateway. Now, all of the networking paths are set. And then the other thing it'll do is connect into the client devices, the Workspot client. It'll configure those so they can work as well. Now, these users, whether they're in the corporate office or whether they're out there in the field, will be able to connect to their primary or their secondary or whatever they need to automatically.
Hold up. I see Active Directory here. Please tell me that's not a hard requirement.
Well, the world of Active Directory is vast and it's been around for a long time and might still be around for many more years. But we also support, of course, Azure Active Directory. And that would be another polling question I would have for a webinar like this. Is like, who's using AD and who's using AAD and who's using both? Right?
Yeah, there's many customers, I think, that are using both. They'll be using both for a long time, but many want to move off what they consider a legacy model, but they're tied to it for many enterprise applications, but want to start deploying services net new that exist only in a cloud-hosted directory. And you guys can do that just as one or two others can, but you guys can do it. Is there any other directories you can natively support right now?
Now, there's other authentication mechanisms we support, and that's one of the things that's also flexible. Workspot is Okta and various others. So we connect with customers to figure out what it is they're using for
I think it was just a bind and LDAP directly as well. I believe I saw someplace else too.
Yeah, and then multi-factor and so forth to figure that all in. Most customers that we run into, they're running different versions of different things, but we've worked with most of them along the way.
Another thing I'm seeing on this diagram that I want to zero in on, I'm seeing RD Gateway. We've mentioned it a couple of times. So there's a couple of controversial ideologies about things that Workspot's doing differently. We've talked about the persistency rules and non-persistent rules type of thing, although still some key use cases for that. This is running on RDP, is it not? That's the delivery protocol. Tell me a little bit about that, because other vendors have built their entire businesses around the power of the protocol.
Right. Good.
Tell us a little bit about this decision.
Well, let's do that and go into great detail. And if we have any questions on them, let's hear them. And so the protocol. So 15 years ago, guys, it's been that long now. While I was at my prior company, working away, I was testing the sort of ICA HDX against RD protocol. Back then, it was vastly different. I had sniffers on the network watching the protocols and the differences, and the load associated with RDP back then was just big, fat loads as opposed to the efficiency of the alternative protocols. But that's changed, right? Microsoft and so two things have happened. Microsoft has actually improved RDP to be way more efficient. And so now we're using RDP 10.x with H.264 encoding. So the RDP itself is way more efficient. And the H.264 encoding, as I said before, if you got a portion of the screen that's actually rotating a model, it just takes that sort of rectangular piece, turns it into H.264, streams it, uncompacts it, and displays it for you. So it's doing way more intelligent things. And guess what?
So it's using a video codec where preferred.
Yes, only where needed, where preferred as well. And guess what? it's also, we're delivering these desktops within 15 to 20, maybe 25 milliseconds away. So it isn't about latency management.
It's a mix of two things. Yeah. It's a mix of two things. Exactly. It may not be, RDP in of itself may not be the absolute be all end all of protocol efficiency and capability, but it is much more capable than it was, and combining with the architectural models that Workspot has as far as how do we typically deploy and want to deploy Workspot for maximum end user experience, these fall in line and complement each other quite well.
Yes, those two things. And that's why it's not really a protocol discussion anymore for all the use cases that we've talked about today. And this is across all these clouds on-prem as well. So that is the architecture in a nutshell there, right? And from here, just a couple, three super quick use cases. As you can see from this first one.
And these are, before we get into this, these are real customers. Workspot's got a number of customers, quite a lot of number of customers actually, tens of thousands of desktops.
Yeah.
But these are, what you're going to run here is actual customer use cases.
These are actual customer. These three here are, and I don't have customer names in here.
Of course.
If you want to connect with us, we can get you to a direct line and talk to customers about these things themselves.
So again, they're happy customers are happy to talk to other potential customers.
Oh yeah, especially in the 3D CAD space.
That's a good hallmark of a good product experience.
Right.
Happy to tell others.
So the NPS score, if you don't know, is a net promoter score where you ask them one question and you say, would you recommend this Workspot, to your colleagues and so forth, right? And then it's a 1 to 10 scale. And so as they reply, that comes in, there's an algorithm, and then everybody in the industry uses the same algorithm, and the score is high. So the folks really like us, and the folks that are actually replying are the IT executives that are really managing the Workspot.
The ones that get stuck holding the bag when things go south.
That's right. Yeah. And the ones that get the credit when things are working well also, which there's a lot of that going on. So the 3D folks are an amazing group of folks because not only have they found this newfound solution that they thought never could have existed because it couldn't really on-prem, it does in the cloud, but also they collaborate together more than I've seen anybody. These guys, these IT leaders from these AEC organizations, architectural engineering and construction, work together and collaborate on meetings just with them, just all of them. Now, sometimes they collaborate on projects, sometimes they compete on projects. So it's a combination, right? And they're spread all over the country, but they come together and they collaborate. They give us tons of feedback, and then they also share the Workspot solution with the other folks. And that's one of the reasons why it's spread so fast throughout that market, if you will. And so you can see the challenge here is that these guys have 3D CAD applications. The end user needs to click and rotate models instantly. That's GPU. They also need for it to perform computational exercises like, I just adjusted a wall in a building, revector all the plumbing now and make sure it doesn't go through a light switch or something like that, right? That's computational, that's back-end math that's happening. So virtual CPUs combined with GPU activity, and then massive files, opening, writing, a little chatty sometimes, closing out some stuff, all that has to work and behave in a world that's like cross-country and then sometimes even international, okay? So there's collaboration going on as well. We talked a lot about how they're actually doing that and how it's working well for them. And then the collaboration part is using the big multi-stranded fiber interconnects of the big cloud providers themselves. So yeah, in this case, 500 GPU workstations. This particular customer has about 250 on the West Coast, about 250 on the East Coast, and they literally rolled in one day and said, next weekend, there was prep involved, of course, but next weekend, you guys, you're all cutting over. You're going to show up Monday morning, there's going to be a little piece of paper or an email or whatever, it's going to be a description of how to run the Workspot client and connect in over multi-this. And this happened before the lockdown too, anyway. And so that weekend, bam, they all clicked over and they all went to work, right? And then, within a year or whatever, it was the lockdown and they all went home, and then there was even more of them. And so those guys were happy because they were all prepared for that. And it's across multiple Azure clouds in this instance. And you can see, the benefits, as we've already talked about. It's central management, it's ease of use, it's
greater control over security as well. Yeah.
Security, because everything is actually like you always wanted to do with VDI. You always wanted to centralize and virtualize and secure it.
That was one of the core models.
Yeah, but you couldn't because of all of the consequences associated with it. But now you actually can do that. You get those benefits from that. It's like, so you get those benefits, and away you go. So that's the GPU use case. Another super obvious one is the global software developer.
Yeah, one of the largest actually.
Yeah, because you'd say, are you a international and a global company? And you go, no, I'm only North America. Oh, really? Where are your software developers? Oh, well, they're in Europe and they're in India and they're in whatever. It's like, no, you're an international company. Okay, so you're a global company. And so you can see from the map down here, this is a screenshot of our Workspot Watch. It's our real-time monitoring system across all of our customers through the multi-tenant system. And you can see all the little dots down there for this particular company, where those folks are all located out there and where they're all writing code and cranking away. And guess what? Security, intellectual property, right? The code never actually goes on the software developer's machine. It's always in the cloud.
Virtualized 20 locations.
Yeah, exactly. So they're cranking away. And you can see 3,000 remote contractors in this space working away, and onboarding time used to take 6 weeks.
Yeah, there we go, 45 minutes. Now we're back to that, just in time, and it just doesn't need it. Yeah. Time to value.
And you think about this, it's like, fundamentally changing the way IT organizations function and the way businesses actually can pivot in ways they could never even consider before, right? Now's the time. With the clouds being available and the right architecture in conjunction with that, changes absolutely everything, right? So now we've got the global call center. Well, here's a pretty obvious use case as well. These folks are everywhere nowadays, and a lot of them, they're not even in bullpens anymore. They're actually working from home. So you get into a region where there's a bunch of people working from home, and you can put all the desktops in the region. Again, you're only 20 to 25 to maybe 30 milliseconds away from the folks, but they're all doing lightweight clicking. These could be non-persistent desktops, so that each day, that creates a new one for them. That's fine. That works well. And you can see in this case here, that for this particular customer, it was across 3 regions of Azure, kind of globally. So it's a follow the sun model, as you would expect, right? And so away they go. Cool. All right. Well, we already did the demo. I thought I'd pull that in earlier as we were talking about it.
No worries.
And so, we've covered a lot of ground here.
But I wanted to thank everybody again. You guys did a great job. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Take care, all. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Ciao.